let's study Kubectl Commands. Kubectl, basically we read it as Kubectl Commands. So for dealing with Kubernetes using CLI, right, we use these Kubectl Commands. Okay, so let's see different types of commands what we have in this. Basically using the GUI, using the Docker desktop app, you can enable Kubernetes, and we can use the Kubernetes directly by clicking the buttons there, right? But we have to use some commands. Only using these Kubectl commands we can manage the containers, we can deploy pod, we can start the pod, delete a pod, you can start a container through Kubernetes. Everything is possible with these Kubectl commands, right? So let's see one by one. So there are different categories of commands what we have. So the first one is cluster management commands. We know already in Kubernetes we have something called as a cluster, right? This is a cluster. In cluster we have lot of nodes, we have lot of working nodes. So this is node. Like this we have multiple nodes, and each node we have different pods. These are the pods, and in each pod we have containers C1, C2, like this, right? So how do we deal with the cluster? You have to create a cluster first. So how do you know about the cluster, right? So if you remember, in Docker desktop we are clicking enable cluster. So we are creating cluster by going into Docker desktop, by creating going into the settings, and we are creating a cluster. And while creating cluster, it is asking us to create select number of nodes you want. So we are selecting number of nodes as 1, 2, 4. It's our choice to select number of nodes, right? So we have some cluster management commands. The first one, the command here is kubectl cluster-info. To know about the cluster, its configuration, how much space is allocated for it, how many nodes are there, all details about the cluster we can know it using kubectl cluster-info. Then to list all the nodes inside the cluster, if you want to know the nodes, okay, because while creating a cluster itself we are telling number of nodes, we are specifying whether we need 1, 2 or 4 nodes. So to know what are all the nodes available, you can just use kubectl. This is a default keyword. We will be always using kubectl for every command in this kubectl commands. Every time we have to use this kubectl. Okay, we will be beginning the command only with this kubectl. Like in Docker, we will be always using Docker keyword first, right? So kubectl get nodes. So this will give us all the nodes which are created in this cluster. Okay, so get command is always, get can be used to know the information about the nodes, the images, the containers, right, the pods, everything. We use this get command to fetch about the resources or any specific entity. We can use the get. Then the next command, to show detailed information about a specific node. If you want to know more about a node, then kubectl describe node and then the node name. So we use the keyword describe here. Kubectl describe, then the keyword node and the node name which you want to know details about. So these are simple cluster management related commands. So about a cluster you want to know, you can just give cluster-info, or you want to know about the nodes inside a cluster, you can give kubectl get nodes. And to know more details about a particular node, you can use the command describe. So describe will give you the complete details about that particular node. Next, pod management commands. So we know now inside a cluster we have nodes, and inside nodes we have pod, and the scheduler is the one who will be assigning the task, right? Who will be assigning the task to the pods. So in the Kubernetes, so some commands to deal with the pods. If I want to list all the pods available in the current namespace in the sense here I am talking about the particular node. Okay, inside a node I want to know, or inside that particular problem instance I want to know what are all the pods available. So we give kubectl get pods. So again I am using the get command, right? Very popularly used command get. Okay, so kubectl get pods. So it will give you all the list of pods. And if you want to know details about more details about a pod, again we can use the describe command. Kubectl describe pod name. Right? In the same way, if you want to print the logs of a specified pod, I want to know the functioning of the particular pod, I can give kubectl logs and the pod name. It will display all the logs. Currently, what all tasks that pod is doing, what input is coming to that, how it is processing, all that things can be monitored using these logs. Right? So another command with the pod is execute a command in a running container within a pod. Inside a pod I have so many containers C1, C2, C7, let's say, right? So I want to run a command for a particular container. Okay, then I have to use this command kubectl execute exec -it pod name -- container name and the command. Let's say you want to stop this container or restart the container, so you can use this command to restart a container or stop or start a container inside the pod. Within a pod, if there is a container, to start or stop it, we have to use this command. And finally, if you want to delete a specific pod, we can just say kubectl delete pod and the pod name. Kubectl delete pod and the pod name. This will delete the particular pod from the cluster, from the node, sorry. Inside a node, we have different pods. So if you want to delete a specific pod, it is simple kubectl delete pod and the pod name. Right? Next, deployment management commands. So some commands with respect to deployments, because we have to deploy it. We want, when we only deploy it, only then we are actually mapping the node and the pod. Right? So deployment doesn't means the generic term of software engineering where you deploy it. Okay, deployment is actually a kind of a tag created through which we actually deploy the applications. Okay, so if you remember in the discussion of the Kubernetes, we talked about deployment here, right? So deployment is a Kubernetes object used to manage a set of pods running your containerized applications. So to manage some pods, right, we use something called as a deployment. It's an object. It provides declarative updates, meaning you tell Kubernetes what you want and it figures out how to get there. Okay, so it will get us the declarative updates. So deployment is the one which can help us to talk more about the containers, right? It's an object. So when you are dealing with the deployment, right? So what are the commands? We use it here. So if you want to list all the deployments, kubectl get deployments as usual. If you want to know more information about it, kubectl describe deployment and the deployment name. Right? So here comes the important game. When you want to scale your application, let's say currently I am having my container, I am having container C8. Okay, I am having container C8. This I have kept inside a pod P2, and this is inside a node. Okay, this is inside a worker node. Let me call this as worker node as worker 1. Right? Now I want to make multiple replicas, okay, of this particular because I want to scale my application. This container, the service which is there inside this container C8 is having huge load. It's having huge load. So how do I scale it? For that, kubectl scale deployment name, through which deployment are we accessing it, -- replicas equal to 3. If you see the command here, it is -- replicas equal to 3. So it will make 3 different replicas. Okay, then check the status of deployment rollout. If you have done some rollout, you want to see the status, again kubectl rollout status deployment name. Same way, if you want to know the version history, revision history, we can see that. Okay, if you want to roll back something, you have to use rollout and undo command. We have to use undo, which will roll back to the previous deployment history. Okay, the previous deployment status, it will be migrated, it will be moved to that status, right? the next one is service management commands, right. So, you also create services. Okay. So, to know all the services available, we can use kubectl get services. If you want to know more detail, it is describe service, service name, right. So, expose a deployment as a load balancer service on port 80. So, there is one deployment through which your application is deployed and you want to expose it, okay, as a load balancer service. It means you want your load to be balanced between those two particular services. A particular container, a particular image is into a container, and this container you want to have multiple copies. Then in that case you can use kubectl expose deployment, the deployment name -- type equal to load balancer. Okay, I want to have a load balancer service on port 80. Okay. Then if you want to delete a specific service, kubectl delete service, the service name, using which we can delete the services. Okay. Let us see the next type of commands. We have configuration management commands, right. So, we were talking about config map. Okay. So, the important credentials can be stored in this config map, and from the config map, whenever I am restarting the pod, stopping the pod, deleting a pod, still I can have the details in this config map, right. So, if you just go and discuss what is config map, the other day we have talked about, a config map stores configuration settings separately from the application. So, the changes can be made without modifying the actual code. Okay. So, let us see an example here. Imagine you have an application that needs some settings like database password or an API key. Instead of hard coding these settings in your code, in your app, you can store them in the config map. So, your application can then read these settings from the config map at runtime. So, you can create a config map, you can store the credentials, passwords, any API key, whatever you want in the config map instead of writing in the code, right. So, during runtime, our code will access that config map and get those details and perform the task. Okay. So, what are the commands with respect to the configuration management? Okay. So, to create a config map, kubectl create config map name -- from file equal to path. Okay. So, here we have to specify the path from where we are having those details. Okay. So, in this file and in this path in your laptop or desktop machine, right, you can have the details in a file. So, you can create a config map from that file, right. Then create a secret from a literal key value pair. Okay. So, kubectl create secret, a generic secret name from literal equal to key equal to value, right. So, what is a secret? So, let us go and understand again what is a secret. We have seen this. A secret is a way to store sensitive information like passwords, API keys or tokens securely in a Kubernetes cluster. So, it is a way we can store the sensitive information. So, whatever password, the API keys, tokens you want to store, any other entity you want to store, we can use a secret. So, how do we access it? Using the secret, right. So, how do you create a secret? Kubectl create secret generic, the secret name -- from literal equal to key equal to value. So, you can give the key value pair here. Okay. So, it will store that password or it will store the API key accordingly, right. So, if you want to know more information about a specific config, definitely I have to go and use the describe command, right. So, and even if you want to know more about the secret, you can also give kubectl describe secret or the secret name. If you want to list all config maps available, you can give get kubectl get config maps. So, this will list all the available config maps. Okay. List all secrets, again I can use kubectl get secrets, right. So, get command and the describe command are very popularly used or frequently used commands in every category of kubectl commands. Either you want to create it, you want to understand more about it, or you want to get the display. It is like select star command in the SQL what we have. We use select star command, right. In the same way we have this get command, right? So let's see the more comments. The next one is volume management. So we have been talking about persistent volume, right? So what is this persistent volume? Okay, so it's a volume is a place where you can store your data. Basically it's a storage, it's talking about storage which is persistent, means it will not be deleted. Even if the pod is deleted or node is deleted, data is stored. Okay, so we just go back to that volume what we were talking about, right? See, persistent volume, what is this? Persistent volume in Kubernetes is a piece of storage in the cluster that you can use to store data, and it does not get deleted when a pod is removed or restarted. Even our pod is removed or deleted or restarted, the data in the persistent volume is not deleted, it's still there, right? Basically it is a small piece of storage inside the cluster where we can store any information we want to store, right? That is a persistent volume. So how do we create a volume or play with that volume, right? So if you want to see all volumes created, kubectl get pv. Okay, so this is the command to know all the persistent volumes available in the particular namespace. List all persistent volume claims. It means how much space has been utilized. Okay, volume claims. Then we can give kubectl get pvc. Okay, you want to know more details about the particular volume, you can use a describe. And if you want to know more detail about a particular claim, then again we can give kubectl describe pvc and the pvc name, right? So these are related to volume. Okay, if you link this, you can understand, right? Whatever we have studied in the terminologies, for everything there is a command, and every aspect of the Kubernetes, right? Deployment, pod, secret, ingress, everything are important, and we will be using them frequently when we will be working with large projects. Okay, so these are specific to volume related commands. Let's continue some more commands. Health check. Basically you want to know about the health of a particular pod, whether they are working fine or not, right? So there are different ways of knowing it. To check the status of readiness or liveness of a particular pod, then you can go and check kubectl get readiness or liveness, anything you can give probe and the pod name. So this will give you the status of a particular pod. To know about the health conditions of a particular pod, we can use this command. Okay, and in the same way, if you want to know about a container within a pod, right, then in that case you should not, you just have to give kubectl describe pod name. Inside this describe about a pod, it will show the health, of the containers. Okay, overall about a pod you want to know, we have to use this. Or if you want to know the health of a particular container inside a pod, then we have to just give kubectl describe pod name. Okay, so this will help us to know the health of the pods. Same way, secrets and config map files, right? So we know what is a secret. We are going to save the important credentials, API details inside the secret. Okay, and config map is where we actually have the secrets, okay, as key value pairs. So to create a secret from a file, if you want to create a secret from a file, kubectl create secret generic secret name, any name you can give from file, and we have to give the path. Same way, to create a config map from a file, you can give that. Okay, create a secret from a key value pair. So same command here, from literal equal to key equal to value, and similarly config map from a key value pair, literal equal to key equal to value. So some similar repeated commands, but still we can create secret and the config map commands. Config map using these commands, right? You can create a secret or you can also create a config map. Okay, so this will be used by our containerized applications during runtime. Okay, instead of directly hard coding them, we can have them as separate files. The next one is copying files and directories to and from the containers. Okay, so inside a container I want to copy some files, I want to change those files I want to take it from the container to outside or from outside to the containers, right. For example, copy temp FWO directory, local directory to temp bar hyphen directory in a remote pod, right. So, command is very simple, kubectl copy from this source my pod colon from this to this destination. Okay. So, copy, this is the source and this is the destination. Okay. So, what we are doing, copy local directory into the remote pod. Okay. Same way, copy local file to the remote pod. So, if you want to copy inside a specific container, okay, remote pod in a specific container, I want to copy that in a specific container. So, again basically overall it is CP command, copy command, you can always give kubectl copy from and to. Okay. So, copy local file to temp bar in remote pod, I can also say again kubectl copy from and to, right. So, we will see this copying when we are working with the projects, when we have multiple containers or multiple code files, then we will be using this copy command frequently. The next one is get command. Basically, this is the first command which we have to study. Get command is basic command like the select star command. Anything you want to print, you always have to use get command. Okay. So, this will help us in getting or knowing about the resources, right. You want to know about the services, pods, deployment, cluster, anything you want to know, you have to use get. We have seen so many times here how we can use the get. So, know about persistent volumes, I can give kubectl get PV, right. To know about config maps, get secrets. Okay. So, you see, to know about the services, kubectl get services. Like this, there are all the commands we can use get, right. So, list all the services, kubectl get services. List all the pods in all the namespaces, get pods hyphen all namespaces. If you want to list all pods in current namespace, then get pods hyphen o wide. Okay. Particular deployment, get deployment name, right. To know all the pods, get pods. To know about YAML file, get pod my pod hyphen YAML. Like this, we can give different commands what we have here, right. Basically, get command is a simple command using which you can know all the information. Anything you want to know, you can give get. It will show you all the active pods, nodes, containers inside each, right. Then scaling resources, very importantly, we use these commands if you want to scale resources manually. Okay. So, scale a replica set of named foo to 3. So, scale hyphen replica equal to 3, right. If you want to scale a resource YAML file to 3, same scale replicas 3 hyphen f the YAML file name. Sometimes these are just examples to show you how we do the scaling. If the deployment named MySQL current size is 2 and scale MySQL to 3, then kubectl scale current replicas equal to 2, replicas equal to 3, and this is the file, right. And multiple replication controllers, you want to you want to replicate so many things, then scale replicas equal to 5, all what you want to scale you can mention them here. Okay. So, this will help in scaling the resources, basically creating multiple instances, okay, so that we can access the files. Now, interacting with the running pods. Okay. We know the story about the cluster. Inside cluster we have nodes, inside nodes we have multiple pods. Now, I want to talk to the pods, or I want to do some instructions or interacting with the pods. So, what are the different commands what we have here? Okay. So, to see all the pod logs, I can use kubectl logs my pod name, and I want to see the logs with label names, then I can give logs hyphen l name equal to my label. Okay. Dump pod logs for a previous instantiation of a container. Previously, when the container was initialized, it was initiated, I want to know those logs, that also you can see, right. Dump pod container logs, I want to see the container logs, not only pod logs, but inside the pod I have containers, I want to see them. So, kubectl logs my pod my hyphen c my container. So, this is the pod name, this is the container name. So, inside this pod there is a container. So, those details we can mention it. and then dump pod container logs with the label name. Okay, so if you want to see the container logs with the label name, you can use -l my label, right. So we have so many such commands. Dump pod container logs for previous initial. If you want, again just going back to the previous version of that, we can same, you can give the --- previous command to go back to the previous version of the container. Okay, so if you want to stream pod logs, right, I want to see them stream, means what we say, cut them and see, then I can see kubectl logs -f my pod, right. And for container logs, again -f. Logs with the label name, same, -f -l, right. So this way we can see the logs about the pods. Run pod as an interactive shell. Okay, so run -i -tty busybox image busybox :1:1.28 version of the busybox -sh shell. So I am mentioning it as -sh. Same way, start a single instance of the Nynx pod, then I can use the same command. I think we have used this in our demonstration with the Kubernetes, right. Kubectl run injix -f image jinx -n my namespace. Same way, if you want to write the output into a file, that output also can be written pod.yaml. So this is just to create your awareness of different commands what we are there. There are hundreds of commands in the kubectl, kubectl commands. We have so many. We discussed a few. We will be using these in the demonstration, right. These are very important things we should know. At least you got an idea now what are all the each commands and what all different things we can do with the kubectl, right. We can manage everything with these kubectl commands. Okay, so there are so many commands, it is not expected you should know everything, but at least awareness that there exists lot of commands. On the go during working, you can always use the commands.